all had a good lunch. And our post-lunch session is actually a very interesting one. It comes as a part of the Crime and Punishment series that we've been having. And it's be presented by the Mahindra Humanities Center. I would like to welcome back to our venue Somnath and Jorn for another session here. Beena couldn't be here, but we do have Kishwar with us, which is also, I'd like to welcome her back. And I would like to introduce Mr. Bhaichand Patel, who's joining us for the first time at this venue. I'm sure it's going to be great. It's called Death in a Cold Climate. So without further ado, Somnath.
Ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome. Very quickly, Bina Ramani couldn't make it because of certain judicial problems, but we have Kishwar Desai with us. Quickly to introduce the panel, Bhaichand Patel decided to write a romantic crime story at the age of 75. He loves the good life, as he says, has written 2 other books, one Chasing the Good Life and a book on Bombay's 20 superstars. Delighted to have you here. Mr. Horst, I mean, he's a phenomenon in Norway. Well, it's a problem with the mic, I guess. Mr. Horst is a phenomenon in Norway. A chief police investigator, is that the term they give you? Yes, in Ljubrik. He has written about 9 novels since 2004. No, not about, 9 novels. The last one selling 150,000 copies in a country which has 5 million people. So delighted to have you here with us, Mr. Horst.
Thank you. Thank you.
You and I, Kishwar, we are festival hoppers and become dear friends in the last 7 days. Kishwar has had a session with me in Chennai and one here. And now I'm delighted to be able to moderate your session, Kishwar.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have an interesting and good one. And the last 20 minutes will be left for question and answer sessions. Where do we start? Let's start with the conversation around crime writing itself, since that's Death in a Cold Climate. And I'll bring in Horst to start with. How many of you are thinking Jaipur is very cold this year? How many?
Nobody died, hopefully.
Well, I have just been informed by Mr. Horst that his wife is very angry with him because she is living in a place which is 1 meter of snow, so no one complains. To bring you in, you have been you're now a police chief investigating officer, to get this right, and also a writer at the same time. How does 2 professions collide, help each other, and what happens when a murder takes place? Do you take notes for a novel and notes for investigation in separate?
Yeah, well, it is impossible to combine those 2 roles. So I left in my resignation just a couple of months ago.
All right.
Well, I have my strength from the police work, obviously. For almost 20 years, it has been my task to enter various crime scenes, where I, with my own eyes, can see what serious crimes has left behind. And on those crime scenes, I have spoken to several witnesses, I have spoken to the victims, and it also has been my job to interview the people who have committed those crimes. So that experience has meant a lot to me. It brings in somehow an authentic nerve to my stories, which is hard to come up with, I can imagine. That is a part, I believe, of my success as a crime writer in the Nordic countries and in Europe.
But just to place yourself in a larger socio-political context of Nordic crime writing, which is absolutely the phenomenon of this century. You got millions of copies being sold, television rights, films. What's going on?
You tell me. I think it's strange as well, because, and it's strange that this part of the world, this small part of the world, who is a very quiet place, nothing much going on. We have around 35 or 40 murders each year. And it is strange that this community comes up with a lot of extremely good writers, crime writers. That is a paradox.
Okay. So we'll take it as treat it as a paradox for now, but to bring both of you into the picture. India, 21st century, 2013. Publishing world is in a tizzy, 25 years of English writing, and suddenly, in the last couple of years, we have the spurt of crime writers. Would you want to place both your works in this context of crime writing? And also, how it has happened and where it is going to go. I know, Bhaichandji, you also talk about your book not only as a regular crime genre book, but also as a romance story. But just to briefly explain.
Yeah, well, I wrote 3 books before. Chasing the Good Life, Happy Hours, Book of Cocktails, and then a book on Bollywood, all non-fiction. And it doesn't give you the kind of satisfaction a fiction gives. So first, I felt I had to do fiction sooner or later. So at the right old age of about 72 or 73, I started writing. And I produced the book, changed it around. It took about 6-7 years to write. It's not a crime novel. It's more of a romance novel. Kishwar's book is much more, 3 books are much more thrillers than mine is. Because mine, you know who's done it. Yeah. And what we're looking for, why he did it. It's a who done it, not who done it, but why he done it, kind of a novel. And right from the beginning, who did it. And so we go back to his past and present and all that to figure out what happened. It gave me a lot of pleasure, I must say. Again, let me add something here. Indians don't write detective novels at all. I don't know any detective novels which are set here, but written by foreigners. There's a guy called Tarkin Hall, who lives in Defense Colony, an Englishman. He wrote The Case of the Deadly Butter Chicken and The Case of the Missing Servant. Enormously popular abroad, but not that popular here. Yeah. You don't have a hard time finding that book here. There's a guy called Keating, H.F. Keating, who wrote a book about Inspector Gotte. They made a movie out of it called Perfect Murder with Nasruddin Shah. He writes about a detective in Bombay from London, never been to India. All his life he never came to India, but he wrote a detective novel from London based in India. But we ourselves don't seem to write detective novels. So do you agree?
Yes, Bhaichand, to some extent, I think I both agree and disagree. Let me just put it in context of my own writing, which is, I had written, like Bhaichand, I'd written a book on Indian cinema, which is called Darling Ji. It was about Nargis and Sunil Dutt. I wouldn't call it a crime novel. It was a romantic story about their love for each other and their family life and so on, but also about cinema and so on. But there were certain things. I've been a journalist in the past, and so my own experience was that as a journalist, as somebody who was writing non-fiction and then was working for a television company and later ran a television channel myself, I found that there were lots of issues in society which I could not really actually deal with in 2.5 minutes, which is all you get when you're reporting a news story. You have to edit the whole thing down to 2.5 minutes, and that's all the space that's given to you. So sometimes there are very important issues which, as a woman and as just a person living in this country, would make me extremely angry. Female feticide and infanticide, which is the subject of my first novel, was this, because I could not believe that we lived in a modernizing, globalizing India, which was still killing its baby girls. This paradox made no sense to me whatsoever. And whilst I was running my channel in Punjab, it was a Punjabi channel, and female feticide and so on takes place a lot in Punjab. One day a woman came to me for a talk show, and she was telling me the story of her life, and she said that actually she had escaped near death as a child because her family, upon birth, her family, including her mother, father, everybody, had participated in the act of giving her a whole amount of opium so that she would just go to sleep forever. And this is a middle class woman I was talking to, not somebody who came from some poor, educated, English speaking, professional woman doing extremely well in her life, and this was her background. So somehow that story haunted me because it was a murder, as far as I was, it was an attempted murder that was going unpunished. And I was like full of rage. And the more I investigated, the more horrible things I found about how baby girls were being killed, you know, with glass being stuffed down their throats, often being suffocated by their own aunts, being left to lie outside and crying. So it was murder. For me, it was a crime. So I wrote a novel about such a girl who survives. And I didn't know I'd written a crime novel actually. I just wrote it out of anger. I just sat, I finished it within a month of because I was just so full of rage. I couldn't stop writing. And it was my agent who told me, and my publisher said, hey, you've written a crime novel. And it's actually got a detective at the heart of it. Again, that was accidental. The social worker who goes out to investigate the case of this girl finds out about whatever. I won't give the game away because it is meant to be a crime novel. So basically they liked the central character, and that's how, from writing what I thought was just a novel, I ended up writing a crime novel. So to some extent you are right, that we don't actually intend becoming crime novelists, but because there is such a genre that exists and is recognized the world over, it's only because my book was also being published in the UK and Australia and so on that I discovered I'd written a crime novel, and now I ended up doing a series in that. So there is something to do with that the genre itself had not been explored for many years in India. And so all of us, some of us have come to it accidentally.
I mean, you're right. I mean, like you, when I wrote a novel, only after I finished it did the agent and publisher call up and say, hello, this is a crime novel and we'll put it on the crime list. But given that we tend to be, all of us, and as you have talked about, a socially conscious crime story, do you think both in India and the last 40 years of crime writing in Nordic lands, that we will be able to move beyond the genre crime story, which you have moved beyond, and so as you, but will be as a society be able, authors, all of us, be able to move beyond this stereotypical detective story and move into a Indian crime fiction genre as the Nordics have created?
I think so. I think there is a lot of interest in crime writing now because we talk about contemporary issues, and I think I'll ask Horst to also answer that, because, you know, Jorn has found in his own country that, you know, social justice issues are very well addressed through this genre.
Yes, and that is part of the
and even
success.
The whodunits are
part of it. But you're right. I think that is what you were saying, Mr. Patel, that this your novel is not about who did it, but why.
Why?
And that is the Scandinavian way of writing crime novels, trying to tell why crime appear and possibly how to prevent it. This is a part of the genre, and in Norway there is no longer this big gap between high literature and low literature where the crime novels used to be, bringing these social issues into the stories and not telling any longer hard-boiled detective stories. The gap has been smaller, and the crime novels are accepted among all readers, all people.
Mm-hmm. So it's much more respectable.
Yes, it is. Yes.
I have to say that there was a problem when one started writing crime fiction, because it was so far in India, it had been associated with those cheap, you know, railway side thrillers written in some sort of, you know, not a very good language, and, you know, things like that. So it had, I think there was a tendency for people here to think of crime novels like that, you know, cheaply packed, cheaply produced, and very quickly dashed off. You know.
I mean, now just from moving away from the general conversation about crime novels and come into your particular works, I'll start with you. Inspector Wisting, is that how you?
Yes.
Yes? Tell us a bit more. In the 9 books, how does character development happen? Do you feel a bit trapped at times because you put him in a certain kind of mold and he can't break out? And also to be able to sustain a character, interest in him.
Yes, and that is also a key ingredient to the Nordic noir, that you learn to know this character from book to book to book. So when you're reading a new novel, it feels like you are meeting a good old friend. So you have to bring in other issues than just the crime story. You have to make the readers to learn the personal life of your characters. My character, Wisting, he is actually his grandfather for real was the first man on the North Pole.
Okay.
And to reach the North Pole, you have to have some will. You have to have
Strength of character.
Yes, you have, and that is I've copied that strength of character into my character.
Right.
And when I started to write, I have written all these different detective novels, where the detective he was walking around in his drunk alone, solving murder cases. And I wanted a different kind of policeman in my novels. I wanted a policeman that I was familiar with from the Norwegian police force. So
Is it autobiographical? Sorry to interrupt.
partly, at least my character is sober, and so am I most of the time. So I wanted a realistic police character.
Thank you. Bhaichandji, if I come to you, the character of Ravi, your central protagonist in the novel, would you want to tell us a bit about Ravi and how you found him, how he was weaved into your novel?
Yeah, it just occurred to me it's almost like a cliche. I was I was flying between New York and London. I have family in New York, that's why I go there. And suddenly this idea came to me to write this story. So at must be about midnight or 2 in the morning, I immediately took my bag out, took a notepad and wrote the first few lines of this novel. And I think it's a cliche, but it's true that sometimes once you develop a character in the beginning, he takes over, and you can't stop him doing certain things he does, And I set the story in Bollywood because I love Bollywood, really. It's a young boy who grew up impoverished in the hills, in the Himalayas, ends up in Bombay as a music director. It's his story. Something happens. He gets involved in somebody's death, and his past catches up with him. So it's all started in a small way, led one thing to the other, and I enjoyed writing it, I must say. I'm a slow writer. I put myself, I'm good about 400 words a day. It's easy, but there are 400 bad words, and so you write and rewrite and rewrite, and eventually you do come with a novel, and it really is wonderful. What I was going to say is that, I don't know why the Scandinavians have taken up crime writing in such a big way. All the books that come out now are from Norway and Sweden, and there was Dragon Lady and or Dragon Tattoo and all that, and they all come from there. And they've got a niche there. It wasn't there before. We used to read about, Agatha Christie and then some Earl Stanley Gardner. Those guys have disappeared. These guys have taken over. There's something there,
Yeah, definitely.
And we can't do it. Really. It's not easy. Writing a romance, or a thriller like she did is easier than writing a detective novel. And I wouldn't want to do it.
I don't know, I would like disagree saying that it's easy, because the thing with even a thriller, and I think mine actually falls more into the genre of a detective novel, because it does have a social worker come detective at the heart of it. She's not a detective in the police force, but she's just an ordinary woman who is very upset with what is happening around her, and then goes and investigates this particular crime. So I would say that it's not easy actually to even write a detective novel or even a thriller, because you have to plot these stories very carefully. You have to engage the reader at almost every page, because if the reader doesn't want to find out what happens next, you've lost you've lost them, and then there's no point you're having written that book, because it works only because of that. So there is a certain skill that goes into it, and you have to, in fact, I sometimes draw, I know that you also do this, is draw these large diagrams, because I have to get a view. You have multiple multiple characters in your novel, because you cannot have like a single character going through the whole thing. In a typical detective story or a thriller, you have to have, because that's where the red herrings or the kind of people you suspect but who are not actually the real people who've done the crime or whatever it is. So you have these, you build these whole situations. And things which I'm doing, for example, which are about contemporary India and a slice of social history almost, you have to look at characters around you. So very often when you read my books, you might be able to find a similarity between a particular character and someone you might have read about or heard about recently, because I do try and make the connection. For example, my last novel, which is called The Sea of Innocence, which is actually about a gang rape. And it was written before the Nirbhaya case took place, but it was again a difficult book to write because I had to bring in contemporary history. So I don't think there is anything easy about writing these books. What I would say is easier than writing novels, because novels you can drift from anywhere to anywhere as far as the plotting is concerned, so long as you can hold the reader's interest. But here you have to hold the reader's interest, plus the plot has to be very, very tight. You cannot have any loose ends anywhere.
No, but to come back to the earlier question of your central character, the lady from Jalandhar.
Yes.
How did you dream her up? I understand where the inspiration is from, but what are her quirks? Tell us a little about this lovely young...
Well, I think I wrote this character mainly because of people like Jorn and people like Bhaichand, because there are just too many male characters who dominate detective novels.
Yeah.
And I was like fed up with that, so I said no, or dominate novels in general.
Yeah.
And Indian women, when they're portrayed in novels, are generally very beautiful, seductive, sexy, long hair, green eyes, whatever it is, this whole package that comes with it, sari clad, blah, 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 demure. And I just wanted to break that, because I wanted to have a middle-aged, not good looking, a woman with a lot of boyfriends, a healthy sex life, does what she likes, not dependent on any man, everything. I wanted to break every stereotype in the book. And so I had fun inventing her, because there are lots of women I see like her around me, but for some strange reason, they're not in the literature of our times.
Any autobiographical element?
No, I wish I could be like her. I wish I could be as uninhibited as Simran Singh is, and do the kind of things and show the kind of courage. So maybe that's my, the life, the avatar I would have liked to have, but alas.
But just one last question on this very quickly. And what I asked Mr. Horst is, do you, after a point, having written 3 books and you 9, find it slightly constricting that of where to take that central character? Can any more nuance be added?
It's surprising how much, as Bhaichand says, characters tend to often take over your imagination, and every time I write about her, it's astonishing how much I learn about her. So, and I hope therefore the reader also learns, so in every book there is some aspect of her which is revealed and then becomes, I hope, more interesting for me and possibly for the reader. I don't know, you don't look like you agree.
Yes, but this is a good question, because I'm thinking always when I'm finishing one novel, then I'm thinking, no, it's almost over. I can't drag this character any longer. But then suddenly he appears and his life goes on.
And the nice thing is he or she is like a real character.
Yes. And this might be the third answer to why the Nordic noir and why the Nordic crime novels are so popular, because they are all about modern people. Yeah. Modern people that we can recognize and almost look at ourselves. These novels have somehow left those old English smoking rooms with the butler outside who usually was the suspect. These are modern novels, like Agatha Christie, as you mentioned, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask all 3 of you this general question. Crime writing, the genre has been around for hundreds of years now, and we are all products of history and our own readings. 2 or 3 of your favorite characters in crime reporting, writing, the crime genre itself, and what you've been influenced by, and why?
Why don't you start?
Bhaichand ji,
Scandinavia, what?
No,
What has been your influence?
influence of,
What influenced me?
from reading.
Huh?
Reading literature.
Literary, oh gosh. I don't think my favorite authors are basically, old timers, Scott Fitzgerald, for example.
Yeah.
If I can write 1% of the way he writes, I'd be in heaven, He's always been my god as far as that, more than Hemingway or others. Then of course the classics are there, the Brontes, Emily sisters.
We're talking specifically in the crime genre.
What?
The crime-
Specifically in the crime genre, what would be your influences?
Crime writer.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, Raymond Chandler.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
It
Raymond
brings
Chandler was
alive
great.
Los Angeles.
Yeah, he's a tough. Mickey Spillane.
Yes.
You remember Mickey Spillane? He probably died before your born.
1920s.
Huh?
1920s, yes. Early.
They were great
Yeah.
sort of detective and thriller writers. Yeah.
Mr. Horst,
Well,
yours?
there is one writer that has had great influence on me. He's big all over the world. Henning Mankell. Henning Mankell, the Swedish crime writer.
Mankell.
Yes.
But I don't think he's a common name in India. But
No, he's
very
very
much.
he is
popular. He's very
okay,
popular.
great.
I read him in England.
Because
yes.
well, okay, and on my first day at school at the police academy, my mother sent me this package, and it was the first novel with Kurt Wallander. And she told me, if you're going to be a policeman, you better read this novel.
Wow, brilliant.
And I did, and afterwards I was thinking, that is the kind of policeman I want to be. Not an oldie grumpy old man, but a policeman with a big concern about what is going around him. Somehow Henning Mankell and Kurt Wallander has staking out my path, my career to become a senior investigating officer like Kurt Wallander.
So I must ask you a follow-up question, a
Okay.
chicken and egg question. So does, in your case, fiction influence life or life influences fiction? So,
I think it goes both ways. There seems to be like what I'm writing about is happening next in real life.
right.
More than I'm influenced of what happened and bringing it into my novels.
I'm really fascinated by, and I'm sure you guys are. You have written a crime novel. Another crime has happened in real life. You're a police inspector. Does your writing influence your police work? Because you're thinking very differently now in that
Yes.
space.
I think my writing has made it easy for me to see both sides of a case, of a story. There are always two sides of a story, and as a policeman, you sometimes forget that. And being a writer has made it easier for me to see both sides of a story.
So you are saying
Also-
it would have made you a better police inspector? being a
Yes,
writer?
it has, because I can see that the offender also is a victim when it comes to the end of it.
Kishore, we should get our police inspectors to
To
start
read,
writing stories.
to begin with, I think they should read, and then the next one can be they can begin to write.
But your
Yes, sir.
influences.
It's very interesting you should say that, because I actually, apart from Agatha Christie, which is, I hardly used to read crime fiction because my influences have all been from the literary genres. But sometimes in the best novels you find a crime at the heart of it, like Charles Dickens and so on. You would find that there would be something behind which happened in their childhoods or something which would then become an influence. So, and my major influence in my life has always been Saadat Hasan Manto, the Urdu short story writer. And I think from him what I took, and which I try and bring into my writing, especially of crime, is the very cold and analytical look he took of events happening around him, and the boldness with which he used to write about them, regardless of what society will say, whether these are things he should be writing about. He was dragged to court. Hopefully that's not going to happen to me, but he was dragged to court over 5 or 6 times for the kind of writing he did. And I really appreciate that, somebody who is pushing pushing the genre further, pushing the envelope, revealing aspects of society which most of us do not want to confront. And I think that is what I've learned from him in terms of my own fascination with crime fiction, is that it gives me the opportunity to look behind the hypocrisy at the reality of whether it be rape, whether it be the commodification of women's bodies in my other book, which is called Origins of Love, which is about surrogacy, the whole surrogacy industry, whether it is about gender feticide, infanticide, and the issues like that. I think if we can begin to open up, because as we said right in the beginning of this discussion, crime writing is a great way to look also at contemporary issues. You may not find solutions at the end of your book, but at least you have uncovered them and you have removed some of the hypocrisy. We were not prepared to discuss things like rape on public platforms before, but we are prepared to do it now. So that is a big step.
May I add something
Please.
here? Sometimes truth can be stranger than fiction. We are supposed to have tonight here Bina Ramani. Now, as strange as it seems, she can't come because she has a court case in Delhi. And Bina wrote a book called Bird on a Banyan Tree. A lot of it has to do with the Jessica Lal murder in the restaurant that Bina owned. If you read that story, it's stranger than fiction, really. The kind of things that happened to poor Bina. She was innocent, She pointed out the culprit, the guy who committed the murder. But she got the brunt of everything from the police investigation. For a simple reason, the person who committed the murder was very powerful. His great-granduncle was once a president of India. His father was a minister in Haryana government. The minister of law at the time of the murder took place was from Haryana, a friend of his father. So they gave the person who was innocent more hard time than the person who committed the murder. And he eventually was acquitted because the judge, who was an additional sessions judge, was promised a high courtship, a judge in the high court. Thank God it didn't happen because the president turned it down. But it's a much a stranger story. Bina is not here, but her book is for sale, Bird on a Banyan Tree, if anybody is interested.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Bhaichand, for that. Now, again, to come back to crime fiction and death and cold climates. You and I had a conversation in Chennai about this, which led to nowhere. But about about the book as a product, or the book as a work of art. Given the numbers which you sell, given the numbers some of the crime writers here also have started to sell, does our art, what we want to write about, get constricted by the publishers' expectations, agents' expectations? I mean, most times we would want to say no, but after 9 successful novels, after 3 successful novels, after you've written your 4th book, how honest are we to the craft of writing? And can it be divorced from expectations of readership, reach, festivals? All 3 of you.
I feel that I've written a masterpiece every time I finish a book, and then the publisher doesn't like it, So it's not a masterpiece, really. So I'm really dependent on, I think the publishers know what they're doing. People who write for themselves, I know people have a very niche audience sometimes, but if a book doesn't sell, I personally don't see much point. I want to communicate. And it need not be a large audience. Something like 150, I'd love to have 150,000 readers. And his book, you won't believe it, sells for 4,000 rupees each. Could you believe that? We're lucky if we get 300 rupees for a book, And I write for a readership. I hope somebody reads my book. I really feel that way.
No, but does the process of creating the plot, creating the characters, does that get compromised at any point, thinking about the bottom line?
I compromise. I can't write about sex, for example. When there's my character is having sex, I gloss over it. I pass over it very quickly. Because it embarrassed me, some of my family members reading it. I'm old-fashioned, you know. So I'm okay with it. I read pornography quite a bit. But I'd be embarrassed to write something which will embarrass some of my sort of close relatives. As I said, I'm old-fashioned.
Thank you. I'll come to you.
Well,
I mean, let me frame the question again in your
Okay.
case. 9 successful novels.
Yes.
Those kind of numbers. Will the 10th novel be burdened by the expectation of the publisher has on you and the advance you've got?
No, because when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about you. I'm not thinking about the readers, and I'm not thinking about the publisher and anything other than myself. In fact, writing is a very lonely process, and it's me going into myself, reading a novel that I would very much like to, writing a novel that I very much would like to read myself. Sorry to say, I'm not taking requests when it comes to what's coming into my novels. I'm not thinking about my readers at all.
You're a good man. Okay, Shiva.
Well, I think what happened with my first novel was that it got this award in the UK. It got the Costa First
Award,
Novel Award for the best first novel published in the UK and Ireland. And you know, that I think at that time I did feel a huge amount of pressure from my publisher and from my agent. You know, now the next novel has to be even better than that. But you know, my attitude was more or less like yours. There was a story that fascinated me, and ultimately I just wrote that, you know, because it was something which just obsessed me. It was a story about surrogacy. I just got into it. I wrote it. I think, of course, the feedback comes to you later on from the publisher who will say, okay, why did you write this? What did you mean by this, etc., which is fine. The editor does it, and you sort of try and, you know, we used to have a lot of fights, my editor and me, you know, we used to really get angry, and I would not agree, and she would disagree, and for 2 days we would not exchange emails or whatever, you know, and sit in our grumpy little spaces. But, you know, she was wonderful, and at the end of it, she also, you know, took 2 steps forward. So I think those things do happen, that there are expectations, sometimes you meet them, sometimes you don't. But the honesty with which you write has to be there, because if you're not authentic and if you're not credible about what you're writing, you know, if you're writing for the gallery out there, then it is going to reflect in your writing, and you're not going to get the sort of response that I'm sure all of us hope for and expect. You know?
Just to push the processes of writing a bit forward now, to all 3 of you, where do you take yourself when you write? In the sense, it's a serious question. Do you take yourself off to Goa or a cold climate cottage somewhere, or write in the social milieu that you're writing about? Because I'm sure it influences the language, rhythm, patterns when you're removed from it, or writing within it. It's to all 3 of you.
I write in my bedroom. I have a large bedroom. I have a desk in a corner. I write there. I'm comfortable. I need to socialize. I can't lock myself in Goa and write. I won't be able to write. I write when I feel like it. The inspiration may come in the morning, may come in the afternoon. You sit there, you write 200 words, 200 bad words, but when you get the flow, it comes. And I need to meet people all the time. So I'm a social bird. I can't block myself and write.
So would you be writing about Bombay in Bombay, or would you be in
No, I can write. You know, as I said, this guy, Keating, he wrote detective stories based in Bombay. Never saw Bombay. I wrote about Bollywood because I lived in Bombay. Yeah, I've developed the Himalayas because I often go to Kasoli. My friend has a house there, so I know that I have to know what I'm writing about. Yeah, the place, absolutely.
I do.
Can you also write when you're investigating a case at the same time?
Yes, I have done for several years, but I do have such a cottage as you mentioned. A big cottage with ghosts in the attics, but I don't need to be there. That is more for me to get out of the house, don't being disturbed by my angry wife, telling me to go out and clear the snow of the front yard. No, I can write everywhere. I'm writing on airports, on the plane, everywhere. So I don't need to be there.
Seclusion is not necessary.
No.
No.
Kishore, you?
Yeah, you know, I used to want that space. I used to crave for it actually because, but I have to admit that as a mother, as a wife, as a working woman, there were times my earlier writing all used to be done by getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, as you were saying the other day, and writing before you go to office, you know, so you put in 2 or 3 hours in the morning and that's it, and you're disconnected for the rest of the day. But when I was doing my first novel, and also when I was writing my first book, which was Darling G, I did want that, I longed for that seclusion because that world fascinated me so much, to be quite honest. I didn't want to go out, you know, like Bhaichand, I didn't want to go out and meet anyone, you know. And I'm fortunate that I'm married to a writer, so we like sit in different parts of the house on our desk. So I don't have an angry husband or anything. He's quite happy to be neglected and I'm quite happy to be neglected. And we're both doing our writing, we meet for lunch. So it could be in a Goa house, it could be in London, and it could even be in Delhi. But now I've started writing at airports, in trains, in planes, because you know, there is always a new book to be written, and I feel pretty much frantic all the time because there's so much I want to write about and I don't think I'm getting there fast enough, you know.
I mean, I asked this question in the context of that brilliant essay of Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own.
Yeah.
And you know, how
I don't think it works anymore.
What anymore? Yeah, it's a Bloomsbury quadrant. But I think we're almost running out of time, so I'll ask you the final question. Again, open to all three of you, but we will take advice from you. How to write the successful crime story? What are the ingredients we need? Go on, I'm taking
Yes,
notes.
I could tell you, but then I guess I had to kill you afterwards.
That's how to write. Who will investigate the murder?
Better do it myself.
You're not going to reveal anything? The murder in the first 3 pages?
No, I think there's one answer to that, and that is to write and write and write and write and never give up.
Yeah.
And listen to it.
So no secrets will be revealed.
No, but he's right. The only way you write a book is you write the book. I mean, that is the only secret to it, really.
But again, this comes from our Chennai conversation, a murder in the first 5 pages.
No, I never gave that formula.
Yeah.
We had a,
No, not you.
a friend
who,
because I think it would be too much of a formula if you just followed that every time murder, because this was what another crime writer said, that you have to have a murder in the first 5 pages and a twist in the last 3 pages, and then you've got a piece of crime fiction. I don't persist with that, because I think it's very important for you to tell the story and the murder and the crime will everything be part of that plot, and you must make each of your books as different as you can from each other. Otherwise you're basically writing the same book
story again.
over and over again, which will be boring for you eventually.
You just got to sit down and write, you know. I find 10 different excuses for not sitting down and writing. I've started on a novel about 2 months ago, and I'm still on the first page, really. I like to come around here. Before this I was in Calcutta. After this I'm going to Hyderabad. I enjoy traveling, I enjoy meeting people. The last thing I want to do is sit down on a typewriter and write. But I have to do it. I know I've got to do it, and I'm going to discipline myself after probably from the 1st of next month, sit down and concentrate. I follow Graham Greene's style of writing. He used to write 250 words. He used to limit himself to 250 words. If he wrote 250 words a day, he was very happy. Then somebody like Ian Fleming, for example, the guy who wrote the James Bond, he could finish a novel in 1 month. He was a fast writer. He wrote 2,000 words a day. So there are different kind of writers. I'm a slow writer. I'm happy with that. But I do hope if I start something, I finish it.
Thanks very much. And I have to open up to the floor now. Questions, answers are coming from here.
Hello, check. Can I sit and ask if that's okay?
Yes, you can sit.
Yeah, okay. So, I was just wondering what you had to say about the idea of, because you, at the beginning you were saying how you wrote whatever you had to say, and then, you were told by, agents or publishers or whatever, that this is a crime novel, and that, like, maybe the idea that, we already have these fixed genres, and, you kind of are expected to be in one or the other, and the fact that maybe the crime genre comes from somewhere not in India, because, like, you, especially when you said you were writing up, you're clearly making a social commentary as well. It's not just purely crime. So if you classify it purely as a crime novel, you're putting it into the same category as a lot of other novels which are maybe apolitical or whatever. So what do you have to say about maybe like the idea of carving out a new genre for people who, maybe want to make it very India-centric, very social,
Yeah, well, I think that question is addressed to me, so I'll just quickly answer that when I did write this, I was told that this fits into a completely new genre. Some of my publisher did tell me, she says, I think you have written a totally new genre, which you can call a social thriller or something like that, but it doesn't fit very easily into all the crime fiction which has been published so far. That's one question. The second question about not knowing what genre I was writing, actually, I didn't even expect the book to get published, because who would ever in their right minds, I thought, publish a book about female feticide and infanticide, and why would they want to do it? Because there was so much resistance from people even when I wanted to discuss the subject. No one wanted to admit it was happening or it was taking place. So my biggest surprise was that I got a publisher here, the book went on to get all these recognition awards, and even in the UK, people who had not even gone anywhere near Jalandhar and things like that were able to respond to this book so positively. So I think in my case, I didn't even expect the book, so I just wrote it without any expectations whatsoever.
One front.
Just for the record.
Sorry?
Just for the record, I know exactly what I was doing.
You knew. You are a smart guy.
Just one comment. Henning Mankell came to Jaipur a year or two ago, so we know him here. It's just for your information. Just a question, since this is the crime and punish, so let me introduce myself. I'm Indira Chandrasekhar and I write literary short fiction, but I also write detective stories and I run a short fiction magazine. So I'm always wondering whether I'm crossing over between the genres, but that's a different discussion. My question is really, the session is about crime and punishment. Each of you have talked about the crimes, but I wondered how each of you deal with the punishment and whether it's the punishment that the law imposes or the punishment that the perpetrator imposes upon himself that's more important to you.
Since you follow
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure that I got all the questions, but the punishment comes first after I am finishing writing. So the punishment is not a part of my novels actually. But what is a part of my novels always is that justice is done in the end of the novel. What happens to the offender, that I don't tell you readers. If that was anything like an answer to what you were asking about.
Actually, you want to?
Yeah, well, in my novel, the guy gets punished for something he didn't do.
Oh, wow.
So it's in the sense that he was a victim of circumstances. He was somewhere where he shouldn't be, and something happened, and he got punished for it. When actually he was not guilty.
But punishment outside the legal framework, is there a kind of moral, self-inflicted, guilt? Does that also kind of feature in crime novels that you guys read?
I think in mine definitely there is a sense of justice being done at the end. Say in one novel, very it's obvious that the cops get the guy who's done it. In another novel, there is a kind of compromise formula which is worked out between the perpetrators and the victims. But it could be also very open-ended. In another, it's just totally open-ended what happens. So, you know, but the process is gone through, and for the reader, the perpetrator or what has happened or why it happened has been sort of identified.
Thank you. At the back there? Right here in the middle, sister. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Actually, so I've been sporadically trying to write like a crime novel, and I have a problem essentially. Maybe my question is addressed to Jorn because
Hold it closer, please.
Yeah, maybe my question is addressed to Jorn because he has a lot of experience at investigating real crimes. But I used to work in publishing, and then I drifted into criminal law. So I've attended about 20 to 25 criminal cases. But the why of the cases is usually very boring in real life, in my small experience. It's usually somebody had a fight and, you know, somebody got killed, or there was some sort of other motive. So does it take a lot of imagination to take from a real life incident and then like create a why around it? Or do you really see a lot of did you really see a lot of actual incidents which had very interesting backstories or something like that?
Oh, can I answer that very quickly? Basically, you're saying that do we take from real life? You know, as I think Bhaichand said, you know, life is stranger than fiction. You know, some of the things you could not make up. But I have to say that some of the wildest things that I was writing in my novel, I later discovered have actually either happened or they happened while, you know, the novel was still in print, so I couldn't take credit for having created that particular incident. So, you know, whatever you imagine actually is happening somewhere around, you know, so it's like you know, whether it's art following fiction or fiction, whatever, you know, or real life, we can't tell.
I'll come to again to this
Yeah,
question.
well, most of my murder cases is drunk husbands killing their wife and then reporting it themselves. That's not very interesting to read about. But as I was telling Kishore the other day, I started my writing career writing a novel about a still an unsolved murder case from my first day at work as a policeman. When I come from the police academy, the first thing I had to do was to enter this murder scene. And that was a big experience for me to go over that door shelf and go in the footsteps of a real murder. So that case became a novel. Since then I have never written about the true case, but the issues from reality are always inside my novels.
Are cases in your police station less interesting than your crime stories or more?
That's what he said.
I mean, have you ever found a case rather which you could never have imagined being able to write?
Yes, that is those are out there, but I will randomly.
We cannot talk about them.
I have to say my stories are always the most interesting.
How nice to have that confidence.
Out there, please.
Yeah, hello. Actually now, I see all of you, you all are established writers. I want to know, ma'am, especially Kishore ma'am, you write for magazines also, weeklies, and you write for, you write novels also. After reaching certain level, you are established writer, you write it for yourself or for publishers or for the readers?
I think we've answered this question in quite detail. So, that writers, we primarily write for ourselves now. Yeah. So we've answered
something obsesses you, and you just have to tell that story.
And you don't write for money.
Sorry?
You don't write for money.
Don't write?
You don't write for money.
Money?
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't think, unlike him.
Yeah, hats off to Mr. Bhaichand because he's a man from heart.
I love money, but I don't get it.
Yeah, we still can't write for money, it's not enough.
We would love to, we would love to kind of.
For 400 rupees book, I'm writing for money, yes.
We write for art. Yeah. Anyone else? There's at the back there, please.
Yeah, hi. Recently there has been a lot of fuss created about rape cases in India. So I would like to ask the lady that in our stereotypical society, most of the times the girl is being blamed for being raped. I know a lot of intellectual people who write about rape, surrogacy, molestation, all that sorts of things in their novels for the literary realm. And on the other hand, they have a completely different mindset about how a girl was being raped. So I would like to ask the lady that how we being young writers, transcend beyond those boundaries and write what's out there, what's literally out there, because when we start writing our first novels, it becomes a little dicey for us to actually put forward what's out there in reality. So how do we do that? Like, I personally would like to ask that.
You'd like to know how to take a real life case and then put it into a novel? Is that that's the question you're asking? I think you have to do a lot of, firstly, research is very important. At least that's the way I write. I can only tell you the way I write. I can't take, an example from anybody else's style of writing. But if there is a particular issue or a story that interests me, I do try and do a lot of research around it, understand the circumstances, But then what I write is not that story. Then I do fictionalize it if I'm writing a novel, because I do not want to implicate any of the real characters or the real people who were involved. I might refer to a real life case whilst I'm writing my fictional case, because all the time I'm trying to put that background. There is something which I'm trying to do very seriously in my novels, and that is to bring a slice of contemporary history in front of the readers. So therefore, while my case is fictional and I have understood the issues around it, I might refer once in a while in passing to a real life case, but the story I make up is totally what I have made up. I hope that answers your question. That's the way I do it. I'm sure other people have other ways of doing it.
We've run out of time. I'm very sorry about that, but thank you very much.
Book. For sale.
Yes.
Books for
No,
sale,
but
yes,
that,
books
that
for
he
sale,
will
books for
announce.
sale.
He loves books being sold, but it will be announced by Bhaichandji. But first, can we give a very warm round of applause to our panelists?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for a very interesting session. And